right, we're back at NatCon, and I am joined by the senior editor of Human Events and Twitter warrior.
Aha.
I mean that in the best sense. You've been just mauling people on Twitter the last couple of days.
Here's the thing.
Jack
right?
Posobiec, did I say your name?
You did, yeah, no. It's not that I go out with, the big stick just swinging it around, but I do carry it, right? In the traditional Teddy Roosevelt sense.
Yes.
I carry the stick. Now, I do not speak softly, but if someone comes at me, like, for example, Ibram X. Kendi the other day.
This was like, so I don't like getting too much into the Twitter drama, but you have to explain what happened here, because it was such a perfect destruction.
Well, and we're getting written up everywhere.
Yeah.
This is like, of all the things, right, and it's very simple.
Yeah.
Kendi had posted up this tweet like a couple of days ago based on a study, and it was a report in thehill.com about the study that had said that a ton of white college applicants were lying about their ethnicity to claim minority status in order to get into college. And then if you dug into the study, which he had actually posted on his own Twitter account, that 77% of people who had done this were then accepted by the colleges. And a lot of people pointed out, Kendi, doesn't this kind of fly in the face of your entire life's work?
Right.
Because you claim there's systemic racism in the opposite direction
Right.
than what the data you have presented to us shows. So he deletes the tweet, and then I just tweeted out that he deleted the tweet once it proved what everybody kind of think that it proves. Like
It disproved his entire existence.
Play out the thought there, Kendi.
Yeah,
Right? Does
yeah.
that kind of disprove? And then he claimed that I lied. And so I just kept reposting his tweet over and over and over. He goes into this huge meltdown, and then and if you're not on Twitter, if you're not on social media, there's this phrase. You say like, people would use it for Trump all the time. They would say, we broke Trump.
Right.
Remember that? We broke Trump, and he's melting down, we broke him, and Lincoln Project would say this all the time, we broke Trump. So, because he's spiraling out of control and melting down, right? And which I don't think he ever did, but whatever, it was the slang. And so I said I broke Kendi, because you could see this meltdown of just, tweet through it, man, just tweet through it. Just tweet through the ratio,
Yeah.
So he's tweeting, I said I broke Kendi, and then Kendi goes, oh, you just used the word broke. Did you know about the word broke? And it has a history of slavery and slaves being broken by the slave masters, and that's what this person is doing. I'm like, first of all, dude, I'm Polish. And it's also, I don't know if you know the etymology of the word slave, but goes to Slavic, which is but we're if we're getting into word etymology, we're not getting my folks, we didn't have the colonies and the slaves, and we've only been here for like a minute in the US. So no, dude, and you even had liberals were going into his comments saying like, look, I'm not a Jack Posobiec fan, but dude, that's not what he said.
Right. So I don't like getting into the Twitter.
And it's so dumb.
fray,
So dumb.
But do you think there's any chance that when one is so obvious like this one, like this was like, man, everything you believe in, you just freaking reversed it and then deleted it.
It's kind
do you
of
think
like,
it could become culturally important?
It's kind of like seeing that Jenga, puzzle, right? When they do the tower in Jenga, and you just see that one piece and right? You know that's the one, if I just pull that, done, right? So I pulled it, and I don't think
we
Kendi
now
realized
shall
it.
see.
Right, and I don't think. Well, I think that with people like Kendi, so he could have, by the way, had the intellectual honesty to say, this is an interesting data point, and I would love to see the study if it was run a different way, and maybe update my thinking. But of course he didn't do that, right? Of course it becomes, these people are lying and they're bad because they're lying. And don't have any discussion beyond that whatsoever. And I think that where we are as a society right now, because if you're going to support a guy like Kendi, who's, we all know he's using bad research, he's using data that flies in the face of his own suppositions, that he's not rechecking his priors ever, because the grift must go on. And so, unfortunately, I think that given the state of woke corporate America right now, and a lot of this is pushed with these ESG thing that I've been speaking out against, which is essentially a corporate social credit score, not unreminiscent of what the CCP pushes for their entire society. We now have that, it's just that we do it for Wall Street for some reason. So I think that, again, it serves a purpose. The same idea, people will get on me and they say, Jack, why don't you call out all the people that fly on private jets to go to the carbon conference? What about the carbon footprint? Why do they put it? I say, you don't get it. Like, you don't understand the purpose of virtue signaling is the signal, right? None of what they say matters. But what matters is the fact that they said it, and you are going to catch up an entire swath of people who will be lost in those flowery words and the language that's used, and they're not going to care. They're absolutely not, because they don't have to pay the bill, you have to pay the bill. It's not eat the rich, it's actually eat the middle class, right? And eat the working class.
Peter Thiel made an interesting point last night that at these conferences, with Davos and all these climate conferences and all these things, that no one is representing the individual. It's people that represent companies, people that represent large organizations, NGOs, governments, but no one just represents like the one human being who's trying to just fend for their lives.
Yeah.
And I thought that was actually a pretty interesting take, that you have these huge things, which by the way, I'm sure you saw Biden fell asleep at today. It's so important.
If
Biden
only he had purchased a high quality American-made pillow. Did you even know? Maybe from Minnesota, a place called mypillow.com with promo code POSA, up to 66% off. Joe, make sure that you get your order in now. The supply chains have been having some issues, but don't worry, because this doesn't have to come from overseas. It's American made. And by the way, utilize promo code POSO. No, don't pay full freight. Come on, Joe. I'm doing this for you.
You see how I handed you that one? I mean, that was like silver platter stuff.
No, but this is the same thing with these corporations, that when they push this stuff, when they promote Kendi, when they give money for this, it's not about actually putting Kendi in a position of power, right? It's just about saying that they check the box, and then they go off and do whatever they want.
Is this really all about China? You were on my show maybe a month and a half ago or so, and we talked a bit about this, but is this all really that this social credit thing that you just mentioned is just being ushered in? China basically is controlling all our boardrooms, whether they know it or not, and we're slowly just going in that direction?
Well, I think it's not necessarily about, like, I wouldn't say that China's behind it, put it that way. And if people have asked me that, they say, is China behind all of this? Because we see the authoritarianism. Yes and no, right? They're behind it in the sense that they created the initial authoritarianism. And when I worked in Shanghai, and I was at the Chamber of Commerce there, and I was working in international business, and I would see these congressional delegations and business delegations and governors would come through, and they wouldn't come to China and say, you know, you guys need to learn about bicameral democracy and a representative republic and all this, and two-party system. No. They came in and said, so when you want to build a maglev, you can just remove all these people from your way, and then you just get the funding, and you have to order the bank to give you the loan, and it just happens. Wow, that's great. So how do we get that kind of system back home? And Charlie Munger has basically come out and said this, Warren Buffett's partner, a long time, really the brains of the operation, the Oracle of Omaha. And he's come out and said, we want the Chinese financial system in the United States. So it's about adopting that system of power and control, which, to go back to what Tia was saying, it is a form of central authority. Now, it's not maybe not necessarily formed solely in the government, but it's the centralization of power. And so the issue with that, as the founders and so many people have spoken out against, is this is what leads to lethargy, this is what leads to abuses, this is what leads to so many issues. And so you're seeing really now a marriage of sort of the woke corporate agenda with woke political actors combined to give us the system that we now, unfortunately, are subject to.
So the $1 million question that I've asked everybody here, I mean, can we get through this thing? Like, how bad will it get before we actually start turning this thing around? Well, I see some signs. I see some good signs right now.
It's sort of the frog in the pot, right? And so the frog in the pot scenario, of course, if you turn the heat up too fast, the frog jumps out. Well, we've got in America, 315 million or so frogs in a very large, I guess, cauldron. Yeah. And, some of those frogs are a little more susceptible. They say, feels like the water's getting warmer. Feels like the water's getting warmer. And maybe 5 years ago in 2016, some of us said, yeah, I'm getting out. I'm getting out of this pot. But other people said, yeah, I'm good, I'm staying in. But I was listening to the Kyle Rittenhouse jury selection. I love jury selection. It's actually my favorite part of trials, because you get to listen to just sort of the average person, just a random swath of people as they were talking. And they were talking, of course, about the riots that went down in Kenosha in 2020. It was horrific, the burning, the arson, all of it. And one woman said, my next door neighbor came to me and said that the American flag should never be flown and asked if I would take it down. And the judge, of course, not going to leave something like that on the table because he's a curious guy. He said, well, what did you do? And she said, I didn't take it down. I left it up and went and bought a gun. And this is just this like older lady, you can't see it, that's off camera. But I said, you know what? When the pressure is turned up like that, when the water in the cauldron becomes hot, people start getting switched on and people start waking up to see what's going on. And I think you will see that awakening be a response to this, or they call it the Great Reset, right? Be a response to this, because I think it's just that people for a long time have kind of been lulled into, we live in a very comfortable country for the most part. Yeah. We really do. We're the wealthiest country in the world. We're one of the most powerful countries in the world, one of the most convenient countries in the world to live in. But when you start to make people uncomfortable, when people start to become they see their systems breaking down, they see law and order breaking down, then they start getting awakened. You see it happening in Kenosha from that lady who spoke out, you see it happening in Loudoun County. When you look at one of the really silver linings of COVID and lockdowns, as crazy as they were and as awful as COVID was, people started to actually look over the shoulder in those Zoom classrooms to see what was going on. Yeah. And you got Loudoun County, which is like a liberal Democrat area, switched on screaming at the teachers. And all it took was actually finding out what was going on. And so I do actually have more hope for the system, because I don't put my faith in the government or in these systems. Number one, I put it in God, but number two, I put it in the American people. And I believe that the people of this country are still the same descendants of people that decided to come from other situations that they were involved in and take that risk and say, you know what, I think there is a better land beyond the horizon, and if these are the rules of the road, let's figure it out, work here, build this land as our home, and I think we can get back to that.
I should let you go with that because it was a beautiful closer.
Wasn't that good?
It was a beautiful closer. It was nice, but I got one more for you actually related to that. Because you mentioned God, and part of this conference is how do we take traditional, say, religious conservatives, how do we take the disaffected liberals, how do we take the libertarians, how do we take the Trumpers and the whole thing, and how can we piece this freaking monster, this Frankenstein together? Do you think it can hold? I mean, that really has been the theme here. It's what I think is the future if guys like us are going to survive.
Well, what it is that there is a Frankenstein's monster, right? And it's Kendi's monster, and it's critical race theory monster that I think everyone from these various different nodes and factions and tribes have all realized is just kind of screwing everything up. And so, I think that on one hand, you've got like a conservative Catholic like myself, who would say, all right, we need to end this. But you might also want someone in the room to be able to say, all right, but we don't necessarily want to institute a Catholic integralist monarchy in the United States. Let's stick with the pluralism. Let's go with the rules of the road. And I say, all right, fine. I'll concede that for now.
Yeah, for now. Very, very honest of you, too. Well, that's what it's all about. That's what we're trying to figure out here. Good seeing you, man.
Good to see you, Dave. Yeah.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.